Hello and welcome to an LSPS tutorial on tree tables. In this tutorial we will create a form with a tree table component. The tree table will contain root elements presented by author records, and the child nodes of authors will be authors' books. Also, we will add a column with further details about the author or book. Let's take a look at what our starting point is. We have a data model, two shared records with a relationship author to book. One to many. Here we have a query that returns authors ordered according to their surname. And we have a global variable that is initialized with the query call. These are the artifacts we work with and created in the previous query tutorial. The database contains some authors and books. I ran this model that includes this flow assignment to populate the tables. Let's take a quick look at the database tables. You can see there are a couple of entries in both tables. We'll now create the form definition we will use for our form. Right-click the module, go to New Form Definition. Let's name it Authors Tree Table and confirm. This is the form editor with our form. You can see that I have changed the palette look and behavior, so it is more compact. You can do so by right-clicking into the area with components, tweaking your layout either under the layout or using the settings. You can configure also the settings including the palette behavior. Now we can start inserting components into the form. Since we will insert only one component, the tree table component, we don't need a layout component. So let's insert the tree table straight away. And let's go ahead and open the properties. Let's start defining the properties. First, let's define the tree item iterator. It must be a reference to a tree item iterator. Let's call it IT. And let's create the IT variable as a local form variable. Now let's take a moment. Let's look at the tree item record. Go to Navigate, open element, type in the name of the element, and double click it, or OK, to go to the definition. This is the tree item record as defined in the standard library. Its data property holds the objects that are used by individual rows. In this case, the author or the book entity. We will define also the label property that will be either the author's surname or the book's title, so we can access it through the tree item iterator directly and we don't need to go through the data property and cast this. Let's get back to our form. Now let's define the iterator, which will hold a data object itself. It will be a reference to a variable. Let's call it row item. And let's create the form variable also. It will be of type object. And it will hold the object used by the row, if you will. In our case, it will be either the author or the book directly, so without the wrapping tree item record. So we need a variable of super type of the book and the author type. That's why it's an object. Now we need to define the data over which the tree table will operate. So let's open the properties back and let's edit the root property. So the root property is an expression that returns a collection of tree items. These tree items will be used as tree nodes, as the root tree nodes. For us, the root items are the author entities, so we need to return a collection of tree items with authors as their data and author surnames as their labels. Let's open the expression editor and let's create a local variable of type set of tree items. Let's call it the root tree. Let's initialize it as an empty set. what we want to do is iterate through the authors that are stored in the global variable authors. So we use for each cycle. So for each author, A in authors do, and what we want to do is wrap every author in a tree item. So let's create tree item variable, local variable, def tree item, let's call it item, and let's assign it the value obviously of a new tree item. And the new tree item, as said before, will hold the data, which are the business object, so in this case the author. So let's assign it the data with A. And we want the nodes to be expanded, so let's set expanded to true. And we will set the label to the surname, as we said before, so we can display it directly and we don't have to cast data. So label will be a surname. Now we need to add the tree item to the root tree. Remember that collections in expression language are immutable, so we will have to use the function add. So it will be a root tree, and let's assign it the value that is going to be returned by the function add, which will take the root tree itself and the new item. Now let's close the cycle, and we want to return the root tree, so let's return the root tree at the very end, so as we have assembled it. Let's make sure it is valid. Now we will define how the tree items will acquire their children, and that will be defined by the children property. Note that the children property is defined as a closure with the current tree item as its input parameter, and it returns a collection of tree items. So let's also open again the expression editor, and let's define the closure. So the input parameter, let's call it I. It will be of type tree item. We'll enter the closure. It can be either author or book. So let's check if it's the author, since we want authors to return their books, but we don't want books to return any children. We will use the isInstance call to check if the object is of a particular type. So let's check if it's of type author. Well, let's say if isInstance, and what we are checking is the data property of the tree item iterator. And if it's of type author, then now we need to cast iData to author, as we said, and navigate to the author's books. So let's define a variable of type author based on the iterator data, which is the author record as mentioned already. Def author A assignment. Now we need to cast the data to author, so let's use the cast function, and the input first parameter will be iData, and then we want to cast it to author. It will be the second parameter. Now we will iterate over all authors' books using the collect call. So let's go collect. The first parameter will be a books, which is our relationship to all the books. It will return all the books of the author. And on every book we will call a closure. We will run a closure that will transform it into a tree item. So let's define the closure. Its input will be B of type book. And whenever it runs this closure, it will create a new tree item. And the data of the tree item will be the book. And we don't want the book to return any children, so the children property will be an empty set. And let's set the label to the book. which will be the book title, similarly as we did for the author. So the label will be title. And now let's deal with possible other records than author, which in our case can be the type book. And if the record is of type book or any other type, it should return an empty set. And close the if and check if it's valid. Let's save also. Now we have the data ready. Let's now insert a column into our form. Let's call it authors with books. And let's display the data. Let's first check if the ordering is disabled. It's not, so let's disable the ordering because we are sorting via our query on the database. Let's insert an output text component into the column. And let's define the content as a t-label. We will use the tree-item operator, so let's call it ti. And let's pick the label from the offered fields. Since for the tree item we populated the label with surnames of the authors and titles of the books. Let's get back to this. We can see it here. We have populated the items with labels of type surname for authors, and for books we picked titles for labels. So there's no need for us to try to sort out the casting and get these details from the data. Let's get back now to the form and insert one more column. Let's name it details. And let's insert into it again an output text component. Now we will need to do a bit of checking and casting again, since our input is a tree item. So let's check if Iterator data is an instance of the author record. So let's go if. Now we will call again the function isInstance with the first parameter data, and we want to check the tree item data, and we want to check if this is of type author. So author will be the second parameter. And if this is true, then we will create a local variable of type author. Author. Okay. And we will assign it the data author. But we need to cast the data since data is a property, and in this case it will be the author, but it could be the book. So it's an object. So let's do cast ti to end author. Okay. And let's return a concatenation of the literal author and its ID. So it will be string author and concatenated with a.id. And if we are not in a row with data of type author, then the data is of type book. So on else, we create a local variable of type book, and again assign it the tree item data cast, and it will be of type book. And let's return the book genre. Now, since genre is an enumeration, you cannot simply use it as when you are concatenating strings. We have to use the call literal to name. The parameter is the literal. Yeah, so we only need the B genre. Let's close the if statement and validate. Everything seems hunky-dory, so let's review the form and see if it is correct, also in runtime. Let's right click it. I'm already running the embedded server, so if you aren't, be sure to run it. And let's check if we can expand and close the nodes. Everything seems to be okay, so now you are ready to use the form in your document or to-do and integrate it with your model. This was a tutorial on tree tables. Hope it helps. Thank you very much for watching.